The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of a small, dimly lit diner at the edge of a snowy mountain town. It was the kind of cold that sank into your bones, the kind that made you question why anyone would choose to live in a place where winter felt like it could swallow you whole. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee and frying bacon clung to the air, mixing with the faint metallic tang of old radiators struggling to keep the place warm. A single question hung over the scene like a storm cloud. What do you do when you've lost everything and the world doesn't seem to care? In a corner booth tucked under a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a tired insect, sat Eli Harper. His hands, rough and calloused from years of manual labor, cradled a chipped mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. His eyes, a faded shade of hazel, stared blankly at the tabletop, where a crumpled eviction notice lay like a silent accusation. Eli was 42, but the lines on his face told a story of a man who'd lived a decade longer. His flannel jacket was threadbare, his boots caked with mud and snow, and his heart, well, his heart was a battlefield of grief and exhaustion. 2 months ago, a fire had taken his small auto repair shop, his livelihood, and with it, his sense of purpose. Now the bank was taking his home. Can you imagine how he felt? Sitting there, alone, with nowhere to turn? The diner's bell jingled, slicing through the quiet hum of a jukebox playing some forgotten country tune. A young woman, maybe 25, bundled, in a bright red scarf and a too-big coat, stepped inside. Her name was Clara, and she carried a spark in her eyes that seemed to defy the storm outside. She slid into the booth across from Eli, her breath still visible in the chilly air. "You're Eli, right?" she asked, her voice soft but steady, like she was used to talking to people who didn't want to be talked to. Eli barely looked, up nodding once, his jaw tight. Clara leaned forward, her hands clasped. "I heard about your shop, I'm so sorry." Eli's shoulders stiffened. He wasn't in the mood for pity. "Don't need your sorry," he muttered, his voice low, gravelly, like tires on a dirt road. Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a small, knowing smile that seemed to say she'd seen her share of miracles and wasn't ready to give up on this one. "Maybe I can help with that," she said, pulling a notebook from her bag. "I run a community group. We fix things. Not just broken cars, but broken situations."
"Can I tell you about it?"
Eli's eyes flicked up skeptical, but something in her voice, its warmth, its stubborn hope, made him listen. Clara explained that her group, called the Lantern Collective, was a small band of locals who believed in second chances. They pooled resources, skills, and time to help people in their town who'd hit rock bottom. "We don't have much," she admitted, her breath catching as she spoke. "But we have each other. And I think we can help you, Eli, if you'll let us." Her words hung in the air, mingling with the scent of maple syrup from a nearby table. Eli wanted to push back, to tell her he didn't need charity, but the weight of his situation pressed down harder than his pride. He nodded, just barely, and Clara's face lit up like the first star in a winter sky. Over the next week, Clara and her group became a quiet force in Eli's life. The first act of kindness came on a Tuesday morning, when the snow was so thick it turned the world into a white blur. Eli woke to the sound of shovels scraping outside his small rental house. He peered through the frost-covered window to see 3 strangers, 2 men and a woman, their faces red from the cold, clearing his driveway. They weren't just shoveling, they were laughing, their breaths puffing out in clouds, as if the act of helping was its own reward. When Eli stepped Outside, one of them, a burly man named Tom, waved him over. "Heard you're in a rough spot," Tom said, his voice muffled by a scarf. "Figured we'd start with the basics. Can't fight a storm if you're stuck in one." Eli's throat tightened. He hadn't asked for this, but the sight of those strangers, their hands raw from the cold, working for him, it cracked something open inside him. The days that followed brought more surprises. Clara showed up with a box of tools, donated by a retired mechanic who'd heard about Eli's fire. He said these were gathering dust, she told him, her eyes bright. "Thought you might put them to better use." Eli ran his fingers over the worn handles of a wrench, a screwdriver, a hammer, tools that felt like old friends. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of possibility, like a match struck in the dark. But the eviction notice still loomed, a ticking clock he couldn't ignore. Every night he lay awake, the creak of the house echoing his fear. What if this isn't enough? The turning point came on a frigid Saturday, about 4 minutes into this story if you're picturing it unfold. Eli was at the diner again, nursing another cold coffee when Clara burst in, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Eli, you need to come with me, right now." Her urgency pulled him to his feet, though doubt gnawed at him. She drove him to an empty lot on the edge of town, where the snow had been cleared to reveal a small weathered building. A crowd of people, maybe 20, maybe 30, stood waiting, their faces lit with anticipation. Clara turned to him, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is for you." Eli's heart stopped. The building was an old garage abandoned years ago, its windows boarded up and its paint peeling like old skin. But the people around it, strangers, neighbors, faces he vaguely recognized, were holding tools, paint cans and rolls of insulation. "We've been working on this all week," Clara explained, her words rushing out. "It's not much yet, but it's a start. A new shop for you, Eli, a place to rebuild." The reveal hit him like a wave. He staggered back, his breath catching in his chest. These people, most of whom he'd never met, had poured their time and energy into giving him a second chance. Can you imagine that moment, standing in the snow, surrounded by strangers who believed in you when you'd stopped believing in yourself? Tears stung Eli's eyes, but he fought them back. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why would you do this for me?" Clara stepped closer, her gaze steady. "Because kindness doesn't ask for a reason, it just shows up." The crowd erupted in cheers, and for the first time in months, Eli laughed, a raw, shaky sound that felt like a release. But the road ahead wasn't easy. The garage needed work, more than a few weekends could fix, and the bank wasn't slowing down. The tension built as Eli threw himself into the project, hammering nails and sanding walls alongside the Lantern Collective. Every creak of the old building, every clank of a tool, became a rhythm of hope, but also a reminder of how fragile it all was. The second act of kindness came unexpectedly, like a sunrise after a long night. One evening, as Eli worked late in the garage, a teenage boy named Jamal showed up. He was lanky, quiet, with eyes that seemed to carry too much for someone so young. "Heard you fix cars," Jamal said, shifting nervously. I want to learn." Eli hesitated. He wasn't a teacher and he barely had a shop, but something in Jamal's voice, a hunger for purpose, mirrored his own. So he handed the boy a wrench and showed him how to change a spark plug. Over. The next few weeks, Jamal became a fixture, soaking up every lesson Eli offered. The kids' laughter filled the garage, a sound as warm as the summer Eli could barely remember. Teaching Jamal gave Eli something he hadn't felt in years, a reason to keep going. But the bank's deadline was closing in. Eli's hope began to fray, like a rope stretched too thin. He confided in Clara one night, the two of them sitting on a workbench under a single flickering bulb. The air smelled of sawdust and motor oil, and the silence between them was heavy. "I'm grateful," Eli said, his voice low. "But what if this is all for nothing? What if I lose it all again?" Clara reached for his hand, her touch steadying. "You're not alone anymore," she said. "That's what matters. We'll fight this together." Her words were a lifeline, but the fear lingered, gnawing at him like the cold outside. The climax came on the day of the eviction hearing, a moment that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Eli walked into the courthouse, his boots echoing on the polished floor, his heart pounding so loud he could barely hear the murmurs around him. Clara, Tom, Jamal, and a dozen others from the Lantern Collective were there, filling the benches behind him. Their presence was the third act of kindness, one that carried more weight than any tool or cleared driveway. They weren't just there to support him. They'd spent weeks fundraising, pooling every dollar they could to help him keep his home. Clara stood up, her voice clear and unwavering, and presented the judge with a check. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it was enough to buy time. Time for Eli to get the garage running, to start over. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled tight, looked at the check, then at the crowd. "This is unusual," she said, her voice softening. "But it's clear you have a community behind you, Mr. Harper. I'll grant an extension." The room erupted in cheers, and Eli sank into his chair, his face in his hands. Gratitude overwhelmed him, a tidal wave of relief and joy. He turned to Clara, to Jamal, to Tom, to every face in that room, and he saw it. Kindness wasn't just a gesture. It was a force, a light that could break through even the darkest storm. As spring arrived, the garage opened its doors. The smell of fresh paint and polished metal filled the air, and the hum of engines became a song of new beginnings. Jamal was there every day, learning, growing, his shy smile now a grin that lit up the room. Clara and the Lantern Collective kept coming by, not just to help but to celebrate. Eli's home was safe for now, and the shop was alive with possibility. Every clank of a wrench, every laugh shared over a greasy workbench, was a reminder of what they'd built together. Now picture this. Eli standing outside his shop, the sun warm on his face, watching Jamal show a new kid how to check an oil filter. The world felt lighter, like the snow had finally melted for good. Kindness had done that. Not just saved his home, but given him a family he didn't know he needed. And here's the thing, that kind of kindness, it's everywhere. It's in you too. Can you imagine what would happen if you shared a little light with someone who needs it? If this story touched you, hit that like button, drop a comment below, tell me about a time someone's kindness changed your life. Subscribe for more stories like this, because there's another one coming that'll leave you just as inspired. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Let's keep this hope alive together.